I've done this talk several times now, and every time I go to do it, I think, oh, it's fine, I've got my presentation. And then I realise all the papers that Joanna Ilker at the Kennel Club sends me, and all the new research, and all the little snippets that I found on various websites. And I realised that it needs updating. And the key thing is that genetics and DNA is a rapidly changing field of science. And keeping on top of it is interesting, time-consuming. But I got into this when I was at university. I did a degree in animal science at Newcastle Uni, and my tutor was Malcolm Willis. And Malcolm Willis was known to some of our older people in here. He bred German Shepherds, and his wife had Bernese Mountain Dogs, but he was a fantastic lecturer and absolutely passionate about genetics in all livestock. And when I was at uni, I obviously went out with Dachshunds before I went to uni, and I loved them and I bred them. We only had standard longs then, we had reds and the old black and tan. And then he kind of spurred my interest, and he said, you need to read this book and this book and this book. And since then, I just love colour genetics. I don't breed colours. I have the odd chocolate mini long pop up in my line, but I certainly do not breed for colour. But I think a lot of the Facebook groups probably think I do, by how many questions I get asked about it. But like I say, I've got a degree in animal science, and I teach officially biology, but I'm head of science at a busy secondary school. So I teach all about inheritance and everything else at a way lower level than really most dog breeders should understand. So the background to it, we have 2 sizes of Dachshunds, 3 in FCI countries, there's 3 coat types, there's 4 base colours, 3 genes that modify those base colours, there's 3 patterns, gives us a total of 216 possible combinations. Not them, thankfully. Not them.
Not yet.
And it's rapidly changing. So what we did think of as a base colour, we've realised is a modifier, and things shuffle around a little bit as our genetic understanding improves and develops. And what I would say is a little bit of a proviso in that there's research going on all the time, and I've only included some of the recent dapple research because that's an area that is changing quite a lot at the moment. So we know it's controlled by at least 7 different genes, and each of which can exist in more than one version, which we call alleles. And the way they interact, all 7 different pairs of genes, gives us all the different colour combinations that we get, which is why we see such a massive variation within the breed. And if we understand these, it not only gives us the ability to predict, in most cases, the colours that you're going to get in your puppies, but also ensures that we don't produce colours that might be linked to health problems. And that's the key thing in the breed. We do have some health issues linked to certain colours, which we don't want to be producing dogs that have got health problems. And if that is easily avoidable, then that's what we should be doing. Now, what I would say is the way the genes work in Dachshunds might be different to how it works in greyhounds or whippets, and colours that we don't want in the breed are perfectly acceptable in other breeds because they don't have the health conditions linked to them. So it is quite complicated. So our base colours, we have reds, and there are red, long, smooth and white, probably the most recognisable of the colours. We have wild boar, and this is another version of the A gene that we've fairly recently realised. This is what is actually causing what traditionally in the UK used to be brindle wires. We don't call it brindle anymore, it's wild boar. And in genetics terms, it's known as the wild sable type. And that, again, is an issue because we use the term sable in the breed historically to be slightly different. It's usually only seen in wires and mini wires, but occasionally it's seen in smooths as well, and it causes banding on each of the hairs of black and red and fawn. As you can see, it's a wide range of visible colours, and we can also have chocolate-based wild boars, which is the dog in the middle. And it, as you can see, go from what would be almost, I guess, like a pepper and salt schnauzer, all the way through to even much darker than this, where it would be a very black-based coat. But they're classed as wild boar. And if you actually look at the individual hairs, you can see banding of the different colours. We have and we do get black wild boars or wild boar wires that look virtually black, but we also get true black and tans as well. And chocolate, okay, and we've got some chocolates. That's a chocolate wild boar, but it's still a chocolate base. Our modifiers. Now, our first modifier is the cream modifier, and what that does, it's caused by an intensity gene, or it's the I locus if we're into the genetics language. And what it does is it alters the red colour to a cream colour. And you get that cream in various shades, in the same as you get reds of various shades, from sort of a very buttery, yellowy cream, all the way to a very pale, almost white cream. And they can also be shaded as well. And to be cream, you have to have 2 copies of it, so it has to come down from both parents. And you can get creams popping out when you've got no cream that you'd think in the for generations, but because it's a recessive gene, it can occur if it's on both sides. Now, when I did this talk last time, I was talking about cream mini longs, and recently there's been some mini smooths that are genetically identical to cream mini longs. So one of the changes that I think, if the breed standard is approved, is that it's going to be cream brackets fawn, because some of the mini smooth people want to call it fawn and not cream. But actually it's genetically the same. And yes?
Well, if it's a fawn, do you get a black people with the fawn, and then with the creams you get the parrot?
No.
It's black, the jet black.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. So our creams in Dachshunds, we want black pigment, the same as we'd have with reds. Okay. So a genetically red dog will become cream, and a black and tan dog will become black and cream, and a chocolate and tan dog will become chocolate and cream. It just affects the red or tan markings on the dog. Here's the creams. We have a wacky cream at the top left. Well, he was slightly shaded, he got a bit of black on his ears. But a cream mini long, a chocolate and cream puppy, and this dog that is registered as cream mini smooth. Some people in mini smooths would call him fawn, but he is actually one that's registered as cream. Okay. So there is a bit of debate in the breed at the moment, but I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that that is cream. Okay.
Is that one on the right with its little nose? So
she's chocolate. She's chocolate and cream.
So it's not. Yes, it's not.
No. So the nose colour goes with the base colour.
Yeah, so she's chocolate.
Yeah, so she's chocolate. We also, to confuse matters even more, we have recessive reds, which are EE reds. Now the E gene is what causes cream in Afghans, it causes cream in Salukis, but not in Dachshunds. Okay, in Dachshunds it is a little bit of an issue, because what it does is it masks any black hair. So we have dogs that are genetically black and tan, but visibly they look red or they look cream, because they've also got this gene as well. So they have no black hairs at all, including their whiskers, but they do have black noses, so it doesn't affect noses or nails, it can just affect the hair colour. And brown nose if it's chocolate based. You don't know it's chocolate based because you can't see the coat colour. You just know that from its nose. So it masks all black or brown hair pigment. This gene overrides those colours, those pigments. So it will also override dapple and brindle, which causes, particularly a problem when you might end up with what looks like a clear red or a clear cream, but is actually a dapple. And if you don't know it's a dapple, you could breed it to another dapple by mistake. Okay, and we'll come on to that in a second. So the advice is that if you breed a litter and one parent is dapple, you should be DNA testing all your puppies to find out whether the puppies are also dapple. Because the dapple gene, you might not see much of it, particularly on some of the colours like reds and creams, but a DNA test is definitive. There's no doubt then, you know what you've got. And this is a litter, one parent's black and tan, the other parent was chocolate and tan dapple, and these are the puppies. So we've got obviously 2 silver dapples, on there and on there. We've got black and tan, and these 2, which are recessive reds. Now, 10 years ago I just said that was impossible, that there must have been another sire involved or something like that. But now we know about the E gene. We know that actually mini longs, mini smooths have this gene in their in the breed, and that it does occur. As far as I know, they've not occurred in standard longs or standard smooths or wires. But as with genetics, it's wait and see, and if it does occur, it occurs. It's a recessive gene, so it could be carried for many generations, and suddenly you get one of these popping out. On their own, they're no problem. It's only when you come to breed them in the future. Now, dilutes. Okay, lots of people are really concerned about the rise in rare colours in lots of breeds. Dilute colours are highly undesirable according to the current breed standard, and I think the wording on the new standard, if it goes through, is that they are also not acceptable. We did a big health study last year with the Breed Council, and we found that they were 77 times more likely to suffer from colour dilution alopecia, which is a hair thinning. And in Dachshunds, that's quite severe. They seem to suffer quite badly with it.
Is there a gene for that?
Yeah. Well, we can't test for CD8, but we can test for the dilution gene.
Yeah, but you can't test whether they're carrying
the issue, the health issue. So, it's another recessive gene, so it could pass down many generations and you suddenly get them popping up. And what the dilution gene does is it changes black hairs to blue and chocolate hairs to Isabella. Some dilute dachshunds suffer from colour dilution alopecia, which can vary from just a thin coat to in extensive problems where they get infections in the follicles and complete baldness, which can be really quite a nasty thing for the dog to suffer from. There is one theory, it's not been proven yet. There was some research done in Switzerland, and that seems to have stopped a little bit at the moment, where actually the dilution gene occurs in multiple versions, and there's the dilution gene that causes the colour change but not the health problems, and then there's a version that causes the colour change and the health problems, but that is not proven. But it could explain why Weimaraners, which are all dilutes, which are all Isabellas, have no health issues with their skin, or relatively few, whereas in other breeds we do see these problems. And when I contacted them in Switzerland quite a number of years ago now, that is what they believed they would find out. But like a lot of research in science, if the funding disappears, it stops, and then people are prepared to give samples of their dogs because they don't want to cause problems. But certainly, like blue wickets and greyhounds, Some of them have a thinner coat, but you don't seem to see them with particular issues, and it's an acceptable colour. So while there's a lot of people, certainly within Dachshunds, that go, well, let's just ban them, let's just not register them, it's not as simple as that when it's the same gene that affects lots of different breeds. But if there was some research and we could test for it, we could legitimately breed away from the problems, which is, you know, at the end of the day, we might not want them in the show ring, but at least the dogs would be healthy, which is, you know, what we should all be worried about. And we know that if this research is true, we know Dachshunds do suffer from colour dilution alopecia. They're one of the highest breeds when you look at the incidence of it within those breeds. Okay, so here's some pictures of some blues. Very popular, unfortunately, advertising on social media. People seem to want them. There's some Isabellas. This is a long that actually has the start colours out of CDA on its ears. That long head should have a coat like my mini lumps, and it clearly doesn't, because the dilution doesn't just change the colour, it thins the hair shafts as well. So the coat is much finer in texture, and they don't have as much of it. And believe it or not, that dog there is also a long head. Okay, so it's pretty, you know, it's pretty easy to see why we don't want them. Okay, we also have some patterns, and the patterns are caused by separate genes. So you can have any of the base colours and any of the patterns. You can have all the patterns on the same dog if you want. Okay, most traditional breeders wouldn't do that. We want to keep the patterns separate because that's how we feel they look best. But if you want to mix them up, you can do, and there aren't really too many reasons health-wise. So dapple, or in other breeds is known as merle, and it's a dominant gene, so one parent must be dapple to produce dapple puppies. But what we now know about the dapple gene is that the gene is actually quite a long gene in terms of number of repeats, and it's to do with the length of that gene as to how much dappling you get from being a hidden dapple or a cryptic dapple where it is dapple but it's not showing it visibly, all the way up to harlequin, which we see in Great Danes. We don't see that in Dachshunds to that extent very often, but occasionally we do. We have brindle, which is the tiger-striped brindle that we see in mini smooths and mini longs, and those of you with sighthounds are aware of it from other sighthound breeds as well. And again, it's a dominant gene in Dachshunds. It's not always the case certainly in Afghans, it's not a dominant gene necessarily. But in Dachshunds, one parent has to be brindle to produce brindle puppies. And there are no health issues linked to brindle, okay, which is good. Now, a while ago, we used to call most wires brindle, as I said when I was doing the breed standard, and there's a lot of people would still call them brindle if they could. And the issue with that is the translation between the German standard, obviously the German breed, and the English. So when you translate brindle, it comes up with stripes or bands on the coat, and the wire breeders were like, well, that's what mine is. If I look at a hair, there's the different bands. Whereas actually brindle within the breed, we mean the stripy brindles, the tiger stripe brindles as we would call them. So there was a bit of mistranslation, then it got kind of used. So we're trying to slowly change everybody. We're getting there, I think. And then we also have piebald. Now piebald is classed as highly undesirable on our UK breed standard. There are no health issues associated with piebalds. But obviously it doesn't fit with the no white permissible. Okay, so it doesn't fit with our breed standard. And piebald is a recessive gene. We do get the odd one cropping up. I was asked about a litter the other day where somebody said, oh, it must be a double dapple. It isn't, it is a piebald. I've traced the pedigree back and there's piebald way back before. So here we have a chocolate and tan dapple. obviously the patterns affect the base colour, so we should be saying what the colour is of the base and then say that it's got a certain pattern, hence chocolate and tan dapple. And it can affect any of the base colours or the modified colours, and it causes random sections of the coat to lighten. It's like getting it in a paint and a paintbrush and flicking it at the walls. Okay? It lands randomly. So you'll get some that are very, very well marked and some that only have a little patch of it. But they're all classed as dapples. For the showroom, we want as even a pattern as possible. So the best examples have got a nice even pattern all over their body and not big patches of solid colour. And the edges of the patches might appear to be like jagged or torn, so you can see here on this dog's ear, it's not a straight edge, it's, you know, it's random. It's a random pattern. And merle or dapple can affect all coat colours, but as I said when I was talking about recessive red, you can't actually see the dapple because it masks all the brown or black hairs. So that is a particular problem because we can have double dapples, which I'll talk about in a minute. Here we've got a cream brindle mini long, and if the dog has got a chocolate-based coat, so the way that, because the chocolate or blackened chocolate is a separate gene to red and it's another separate gene to cream, you can have red dogs and cream dogs with brown noses because they've got the chocolate gene as well. And in that case, if you get brindle on one of those, the stripes, instead of being black as they are on this dog, would be brown because it would show the chocolate colouring on the stripes. It's a dominant gene, so one parent must be brindle to get brindle puppy. And the amount of brindle stripes is random. Again, you can have from really well marked stripes all over the body down to a tiny little stripe on one foot, which can be easily missed. They probably look their clearest on the smooths and mini smooths, just because of the short coat. And particularly on a black and tan or a black and cream, you'd only get brindle stripes on the tan or cream bits. You wouldn't see it within the black coat. So it's not as easy to see. Piebald, as I said, it's not an acceptable colour in the UK because we say that we don't want any white. It's a recessive gene, and there is something that just having one copy of this gene might cause white tips on the toes and tail in some dogs, so they might show a little bit of a hint that they carry the piebald gene. And any of the base colours can also have the piebald pattern. And as I said, you can have dogs with all three patterns, okay? Which look a little bit of a mismatch. Here's some piebalds. Some people love them, some people hate them. I don't mind them personally.
Do they have any German?
There are some that are accepted in the German breed side. So these are all American ones. They are a part of the American breed standard. I don't know about the mini wire, but the other two are American champions. It seems to be piebald goes in and out of the American breed standard a bit like a yo-yo, so one, they accept it and then they change their mind and they don't want it. And there are, I guess like it would be over here, some judges who will put them up and other judges who just will not tolerate them. Okay, but in the history of the breed, as I showed you earlier on today, piebalds were part of the early breed standard and it's a recessive gene. So it is purely because the breeders in the UK decided they didn't want them. That is the only reason why they're not part of our breed standard, because they were there. There's the painting from 1885 clearly showing a piebald dachshund. And if you think that they were including Basset type breeds, that's where they come from. Okay. Shading. It's not strictly a pattern in its own right, although there is a new paper that I haven't fully digested that kind of gives a hint as to the genetics of the shading. But it does affect particularly long, standard and mini longs, where we get varying amounts of black going through their coats. If the dog is also has the chocolate genes, that shading will be chocolate shading rather than black shading. And again, it's thought that this A-locus, the agouti gene, is probably responsible. There's probably versions of that that's affected. And here we've got some examples from a clear red, virtually a clear red, to a little bit of shading on the front of the ears, which is quite common. She's a darker red in general, but she's got quite a bit more black. I was going to bring her today, but she's in season, unfortunately, so she's at home. This dog is actually her father, and he's what we would have traditionally called as a sable in the UK, because he's got the widow's peak and everything on his face. And he's got this heavy black overlay. And from a distance, you could mistake him potentially for a black and tan. So, patterns and health, which is what we really should be interested in, because we shouldn't be breeding for colour. We should be breeding for conformation and health and temperament. Colour just happens, okay? But unfortunately, we do have some health issues that we do need to be really, really aware of. Double dapples or double merles, thankfully the Kennel Club will no longer register any breed where both parents are dapples or merles, because of the issue of being a double dapple. You breed two dapples together, there is a 25% chance of each puppy being a double dapple. And they can have severe sight and hearing issues, from slight deafness, which a lot of people say most Dachshunds have anyway, to being born without eyes in the most extreme cases, because they get this thing called microphthalmia. And it's really not very nice at all. Hidden or cryptic dapples aren't a health issue in themselves, but if you can't see that a dog is a dapple and you mate it to another dapple, you can get double dapples coming out of that. And that's the area of research into the dapple gene that is being done at the moment, and to do with the length of that gene. And this chart, I know you can't read it from there, but essentially at this end, which is the shorter end of the gene, these are our cryptic dapples, and this is from a sample of 102 Dachshunds, okay? All dapple, all tested as dapple. So these are our cryptic dapples where you wouldn't, if you looked at the dog, you couldn't see that it was dapple. Our normal dapples that we would see and that you'd go, oh yeah, that's a dapple, like the picture of the puppies was before, they are all in this blue zone here. My pointer's not working for some reason. And I don't know why that's not working. I think it's just at the wrong angle. But the blue section where it says classic, that's what we would see as our normal dapples that we would like. And then there is the odd one that is classed as a harlequin, where you get bigger white patches, even though it's not a double dapple, but it's quite an extreme dapple pattern. The yellow dots, if you can see, they were all dapples on top of a light or reddish shade of base colour, so red or cream, which makes the dapple really hard to see. That's a double dapple in its extreme. Okay, that's why we don't want it. He has, he's completely blind, his eyes are small and deformed, and he's completely deaf. Okay, that's as extreme as it tends to get. All right, but I don't know why anybody would want to be trying to produce them. And if you're doing it, claiming it's accidental, then you should make sure it certainly doesn't happen again. Hidden dapples, reds and creams often don't show their dapple patterning, and if a red or cream has a dapple parent, we should be DNA testing it. The adult dog at the bottom is a dapple. I certainly can't tell that that's a dapple. And 2 out of the 3 puppies are dapples. DNA tested.
So you don't mean it's carrying dapple, it is actually
It is dapple, yeah. Yeah. You can't carry the dapple gene. It's either dapple or it isn't. Okay? So there is, you know, a lot of people who say it can be carried and it can't. So if you have a litter of puppies, even if one parent is a dapple, if you test the puppy and it's not dapple, it's not dapple, it's just a black and tan or a chocolate and tan or a red or whatever it is.
So if one parent is dapple,
Yeah.
the other one wasn't dapple,
Yeah. There is
and you made
there's a 50-50 chance of each puppy being dapple. Okay? So in these, this puppy at the top is dapple. You can just see slightly paler bits there, if they're pointed out. And from memory, it was this one here that was also dapple. Okay? This photo was sent to me quite a long time ago by the breeder. And she then did the right thing and DNA tested them. Okay? Predicting the colours of the puppies. So, this is where I often get involved. And people will email me or message me on Facebook and go, I've got these dogs, what am I going to get? And sometimes I can work it out because some colours are completely recessive and that's the only possible combination of genes it can have. Other times, I'll look at the pedigree of it and try and work it out for them. And then there's other times when I say, look, you're going to have to get a DNA test done because I'm good, but I'm not that good. In the past, it was all trial and error. We didn't have DNA testing. And the older traditional breeders just knew you didn't mix that with that because you might get a disaster. Okay, so you wouldn't have bred reds to dapples, you wouldn't have bred creams to dapples ever. You wouldn't have bred reds to chocolates. It just wasn't done. Whereas now, with DNA technology, you can do it in a safer way. I'm not saying it's still right to do it, but you can at least test and know what you're doing. Okay? But you need to know not only what your parent dogs have in their genes, you need to know which colour or pattern is dominant to the other colours. So, for example, the red on the agouti allele, on the agouti locus, that is dominant to wild boar, which is dominant to black and tan, which is dominant to recessive black, which we don't have very many in Dachshunds. There is the odd one in America. And once you know your hierarchy of colours, then you can start predicting what you might get. And then you can work out possibilities, but it's the chance of one puppy in your litter being that colour. So if I scoot back to... Oh, actually, I might go on that side. There we go. So, this is the breeding I did 11 years ago. Black and tan bitch, she's now 15, running around at my mum's. And I mated her to a black and tan dog. I wanted black and tan puppies because although I don't colour breed, I like my black and tan mini longs. Okay? That's what I wanted. So I went over to Ireland and used this black and tan dog. And out popped puppies, 4 bitches. And this little horror was born first. 2 o'clock in the morning, bleary-eyed, and I'm going, what on earth is this? And she's not just chocolate, she's chocolate and cream. Now I knew my lines carried cream, so I was expecting black and tans and black and creams. That's fine. I certainly did not expect chocolate and cream. And after a few, can you put that back where it came from? Thank you very much, I don't really want that. I was like, okay. Typically, she was pick of litter. Always away. And she stayed, and I did actually make her up. But, yeah, so when I worked it out, there was a 1 in 16 chance that I would have got that colour. And out she popped. So when I came to mate her, I mated her to black and tan. After doing my extensive research, this dog doesn't carry chocolate, it's great. He hadn't been DNA tested, I should have known better. Because she produced one just like herself. Which which is the mother of the black and tan that I've got in there. Okay, finally got my black and tan bitch 3 times later. But yeah, these things happen. And with any genetic issue, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about colour, whether we're talking about a disease that pops up, there's no shame in producing it. It's not doing something about it afterwards. So if you're, whenever you're breeding your dogs, if you get something crop up in a litter and you go, oh, that's a bit worrying, the worst thing you can do is bury your head in the sand and just go, well, we'll just not tell anybody about that. Because you've got to be looking at the pedigrees, be talking to the breeders who own them, and finding out where this came from, and doing the testing if necessary to stop you producing that problem again. Okay, so any livestock, it doesn't matter what you're breeding, problems happen. Okay, that's nature, and we've just got to make sure that we do the right thing with it. So she wasn't a problem, bless her. But it was a surprise. Okay, that is her parent DNA. Because chocolate and cream, chocolate is recessive, is like the lowest of the low in terms of hierarchy, and cream is also recessive. I could really easily work out that her parents, both of them, had this combination of genes, which at least meant when I mated a mother again, I could find something and breed accordingly. So that, knowing what I got from my, test mating, if you can want to call it that, at least then gave me the understanding, without having to go to the expense of DNA testing, I knew what the parents would be. And that's how I can help other breeders predict the colours of their puppies, because I can work out through process of elimination what dogs must carry. Thankfully, no dilute and no recessive. So with those parents of that combination, each puppy had a 75% chance of being black, 25% chance of being chocolate, 100% of them were going to have tan points, so they were going to be something and tan or something and cream. There was 75% chance of having tan points, 25% chance of having cream points. So when you work it out, those math people who are better at maths than I am will work out that it's a 1 in 16 chance of you getting chocolate and cream. And that's each puppy. So I had 4 puppies, so you go, oh, so I'm going to have 3 of them and 1 of them. That's not how it works, okay? Unfortunately. I actually got 2 black and tans, a black and cream and a chocolate and cream in that litter. Okay. And so, that is the short version. Okay. I appreciate lots of you got long journeys home. Okay. I can talk the hind leg off a donkey about this topic. Okay, and will happily. So please, if any of you have any questions, or want to get in touch, or want some help predicting future litters, please get in touch and I will help and advise you or point you in the right direction. Things do change regularly, so and what applies in Dachshunds doesn't apply to every other breed. To a lot of breeds it's the same, but yellow Labradors, for example, are all EE reds, or what we would call an EE red, and they're all that. Any questions?
What's the cost of a colour DNA test then?
Well, the last time I checked with LabClinic, which is one of the genetics labs that do most of the testing, a full colour panel for every gene is £180.
Well, you hinted it was expensive, and that's why I thought that's
Yeah.
the question.
That's for a full panel. Now, you can test for individual genes a lot less than that. So if you just wanted to know your dog, whether it carried dilute or it carried piebald or something like that, you can do that relatively cheaply, but a full panel is 180. So,
That's why you were asking you, she?
yeah. But you can, the thing is, you can get a full panel done, but it's interpreting it. So I will get, I had a breeder, I won't name them, but a show breeder. They'd had one of their dogs full panel done. And they sent it me and said, can you now explain it? Because you get a long list of all the different alleles that to the average person means nothing. So testing is great if you understand the tests and you understand what it shows. And that actually did pop up a few surprises in that dog that even I wouldn't have ever predicted for that particular line, and I know the line quite well.
Helen, the other issue that we run into is the names of the colours that the labs use. Do you want to just say
Yes.
something about that
So-
compared with phenotype?
Yeah, so when earlier, I was trying to be diplomatic about fawn and cream, okay? If you send off your dog's test to be done at Labaclin, they call the agouti allele fawn, okay? That's a genetic term for that gene because they call it fawn, bicolour, tricolour, wild type and something else, and it's a great long list. And what they actually mean by fawn is what we call red. We certainly don't mean fawn. So if I tested my standalone girl who's burying her head, she would come back as fawn, according to Labaclin. She's anything but. You know, if you think of a fawn pug, you know, it's a very different colour to that. And that has caused issues because breeders have gone and got their dogs tested, and they go, oh, my dog's fawn. And you're like, really isn't. But that's what it says on this piece of paper. Yeah, but that's not what we call it in our breed. It's like we would call a recessive red an E red or an E cream. In Labradors, that's yellow. And if you look on the test on the description for Labaclin for the E gene, it's apricot, cream, red and white, I think it is. So Samoyeds are all E's as well, and they're pure white. So it's knowing what the genes say, but also then interpreting it as a breed specialist.
So you've got the E gene, but then you said there's the E gene.
Yes.
So what is the
So the EE, the two little e's, that's the recessive version. So that's when they are that colour. The gene you're testing for in the genetics lab is the capital E, which is just, you know, most of them. So she would be two capital E's. Yeah, because she's not recessive red.
The language of the science is different to the
Yeah.
language of the breed, so, and our breed calls it dapple and everybody else calls it merle, so.
So
Just to make it
yeah,
really
it does
difficult for
cause a
everybody.
problem. And then when people import from abroad and they call them different colours abroad, so dapple in France is harlequin. If you import a harlequin, the kennel club go, yeah, but it's not Great Dane, you can't have harlequin, so it's non-breed standard. And you're like, so I've had to sort that out for a few people in the past as well. But yeah, I am, you know, I don't want to say I've got links to the kennel club. I've got people at the kennel club who, if I email them and say, this is not quite right, can we sort it out? They do realise that I do understand, hopefully, what I'm talking about. And I do keep up to date with all the information. If any of you are interested, there is a very good Facebook group called Dachshund Genetics. It's an American-based group, but they just base it on the science. So it's not down to interpretation or old wives' tales or anything like that. It is really clear, and there's lots of people on there who understand the genetics really well, and there's a lot of really good debates about different things when new things come in particular. Any other questions?
So now seems like a very appropriate time to say
Oh,
thank you very